is going on? Brian Carroll here, PowerActStrength.com HQ, picking up with 1020 Life, going through the book. We just finished the weak point index and the warm-up index. Now we're moving on to off-season training, and then the next video will be pre-contest training. Let me preface this with some of the off-season and pre-contest will be a little bit of a review, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that. So just to let you know, if I kind of breeze through some of these things, I've covered them in the first 4 parts of this video series. Okay, so moving on. Off-season is quite a bit different from your pre-contest. I suggest using RPE in the off-season. I'm going to explain why in a little bit. But for RPE, you gauge it on a scale of basically 5 through 10. It's a very simple concept. Think of going to the hospital. You go in, you have something wrong with you. The nurse comes to you and says, "Sir, ma'am, what is your pain on a scale of 5 to 10 or 1 to 10? And then you can tell them. It doesn't have to be perfect, but a 6 and 7 will probably be very similar. A 7 and 8 the same, an 8 and a 9, and a 9 and a 10, they'll all be about the same, meaning there's not going to be a great difference between a 9 and a 10 or a 7 and an 8, but there's a significant difference between a 6 and a 9, if you follow me. So again, don't overthink it. A lot of people do. If you need to work off percentages for the RPE to help you, for example, 6 RPE, say 60% of what you're capable of that day. So with RPE, in the off-season phase, it can help you a lot because you might not be focused in, you might be traveling a little bit. So 405 in your garage gym or the health club that you train at might feel quite a bit different in Jamaica at a resort, where things aren't quite optimal for you. The sleep, the training conditions, what you've been eating and everything. So if you're going RPE for that day, it makes things a lot simpler for you. And if you're like me and you really track numbers and you always want to be at your best, it can drive you nuts if you don't give yourself permission to scale things back and just work off intensity for that day. So off-season is focused on intensity, not so much the percentages and numbers. That's the difference between pre-contest and off-season. Pre-contest is where things are really honed in. You shouldn't be traveling as much. You should be focused more. Off-season, you should have a little bit of flexibility and not so much focus, because you can't just burn the candle at both ends and go hard the entire time in off-season and expect to have a good turnout in pre-contest. I've done this, for example, for the WPO. I started my pre-contest supplements and sort of training a bit too early, and about a month out, I was ready to kill everybody. I hated everybody, and I was just overtrained and beat up because I've been pushing too hard for too long, and I didn't have a good meet. I was beat to crap by the time I got to the meet. So I suggest you use what I call staying in the safe zone for off-season training, between a 5 and a 6 and no higher than an 8 RPE. Don't miss lifts in the off-season. Use the underloading principle of always leaving something in the tank, always leaving a couple reps left in the tank, and do it for about 10 weeks at a time. You can do a longer off-season if you want to, but I advise 10 or 20 weeks off-season, about 10 weeks for pre-contest. But once again, if you're in good shape and you don't need a lot of off-season training to get into condition, to start building some strength, and you want to roll in after a few weeks of off-season and go into a pre-contest, everyone's going to be a little bit different. So remember, off-season is going to be a little bit more looser. It's going to be based on RPE. The reps are going to be higher. The volume is going to be higher. The intensity is going to be down. Pre-contest, you're going to work off percentages. The volume is going to be down as it tapers to a higher intensity. The reps are going to be lower. Your supplementation is going to be different pre-contest, off-season. You get it. It's just one of those things. It has to change. You have to flip the switch. Remember, you don't miss lifts in the off-season. If you're only working up to an RPE of 8 at the most, there's no way you should be misgauging things so bad that you miss lifts in the off-season, especially if you're staying in that safe zone of an RPE of 8 or so. I've had people that I've coached, unfortunately, that literally would miss after a single when they're supposed to work up to an RPE of 6 for a set of 5. They barely eke out 1 rep. Then they message me and wonder why their back's hurting them and why their lifts are not feeling good and their body hurts after not understanding RPE or not being able to understand that they shouldn't be going heavy for those 2 weeks. No matter how much I told them, you got to stay within the RPE, whatever you're capable of that day. If you're making a jump to where you barely get 1 rep when you're supposed to be doing a set of 5 and an RPE of 6, I don't know if I could help you, to be honest with you, because those are some of the things that we deal with as coaches. And you've got to have a little bit of understanding. We can't do it for you as coaches. We can give you the context. We can explain what the RPE is to you till we turn green and act like the Incredible Hulk and want to crush you. But at the end of the day, you have to do your research too. So keep that in mind with RPE. It's very simple if you keep it that way. Don't overthink it. Think about what you're capable of that day and then scale it down from there. If you're capable of a 400-pound squat today and you're only working up to RPE of 7, think about 70% of what you're capable of on that day. So again, it's not exactly that, but it's going to be something like that. It's a good gauge. So RPE, think of it like this. 5 is an RPE where you should have 5 reps left in the tank. It's a walk, a fast walk. 6, you should have about 4 reps left in the tank, RPE. It's a very slow jog. 7 RPE is a faster jog, more of a trot. 8 is like a slow run. You only have a couple reps left in the tank. You're no longer jogging, but you're not sprinting. Number 9, you have about 1 rep left in the tank for an RPE of 9. You're beginning to sprint, but it's not all out. And of course, a 10 RPE is all out. You're full on sprinting. You've got nothing left in the tank, and that's a max for the day. So once again, keep that in mind. The difference is simply a walk of RPE 5 to a 10 that's an all-out sprint. Keep that in mind. Start with percentages if you're really lost, and then build from there. It's going to take you some time to do it, to understand it. Always err on the side of caution. Remember, you can't burn the candle at both ends. You can't push hard all the time. RPE, I'm going to have you in the off season work up to a single set of whatever it may be, 5, 4, 3. Your sweet spot's going to hover about a 7 in the off season. But if you overshoot your RPE, like some people do, and let's say you're supposed to work up to a top set of 5 and you overshoot it, you get to a set that you can only eke out 4, that's fine. Drop down for a set and then, take 20, 30 pounds off of it, get your set of 5 for the day and then move on. But you shouldn't overshoot it so bad where you barely get 1 rep when you're supposed to be doing a top set of 5. So reduce it by about 10% or so, come back down, get your set in and then move on. Here I'm going to show you a sample 10-week block of off-season. Remember, a word about PRs, don't get too greedy and expect to do a 25-pound PR or even a 10-pound PR. Take 5-pound increments at a time. Remember, if we're talking about a lifetime of training and setting personal records, 5 pounds each cycle a couple times a year, that's 10 or 20 pounds a year. Add 5 years to that, that's 50 or 100 pounds on your lift. So remember, newbie gains don't happen forever. You have to start taking what you can get after a period of time. So once again, I'm showing you now on the screen 10-week off-season framework where I describe starting with the baseline and then building off your baseline the first 2 weeks. You deload on the 3rd week. Then you build up on week 4. The intensity increases a little bit. You're working sets of 3 instead of sets of 4 and 5 previously. 5 and 6, you increase the intensity, with the 6th week being a deload, and then 7 and 8, it ramps back up. 9, you deload, and then you test. So once again, I'm showing you the framework, but again, you gotta make it your own. I don't even want you to follow my sets and reps necessarily, but if you want a starting point, this is a good way to start, then deviate as you need. I've never had a client that hasn't had some type of PR and lifts after a really good 10-week off-season training where we're going after weak points, bringing up the core. Most times people have an extremely weak core. They have no core endurance, which can lead to back injuries, unstable lifting, movement under load, which we know is not good. So one of the things is you want to build momentum in the off-season just like you do in pre-contest. But remember, Put the hard work in the off season. You can reap the benefits in the pre-contest. My job is to put all an end of the nonsense of that you can train hard all the time, 365 days a year. You can't do it. Strength training is not that complicated. I'm showing you in this book and these charts how you can lay out your program, use RPE, and then when it comes time to pre-contest method, then we can look at the fine-tune aspects that we're going to get into soon. So the same applies if you're doing a conventional program in the off season. The same applies if you're doing a combo or a jumbo off season. You just change your days around a little bit, but you follow RPE once again. You stay in that zone that's safe from RPE of 5, 6 to 7 and 8. You don't venture into the 9 or 10 too much during the cycle, only after about 9 or 10 weeks when you want to test it. So once again, this is off season. We use RPE. We don't overthink it. We lay a cycle, we build a baseline after the first few weeks, we beat it, we keep ramping it up a little bit, and then we build out some lifts and hit some PR singles at the end. We can repeat that off season, do some fine-tuned tweaking to it depending on what our results are. Then we can roll into a pre-contest. Once again, make it your own. That's what 1020 Life's all about. Thank you so much for watching today. Please subscribe, like, and share if you enjoyed this video, and have a wonderful day.